The Satavahana Empire, Lords of the Deccan. Chapter 1, Introduction to the Satavahanas. The Satavahanas, also known as the Andhras in ancient texts, were among the earliest and most influential dynasties to rule over the Deccan region of India after the fall of the Maurya Empire. Emerging around the 1st century BCE and lasting until the 3rd century CE, the Satavahanas filled the power vacuum left behind by the Mauryas and played a crucial role in unifying a large portion of peninsular India under one administration. The Satavahana period was a time of significant cultural, economic, and political transformation in Indian history. They acted as a cultural bridge between the north and the south, facilitating the flow of ideas, trade, and religion. Their influence extended from modern-day Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh in the north to Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu in the south. Sources of historical information. Information about the Satavahanas comes from a variety of sources. These include inscriptions. One of the most important sources of Satavahana history is the inscriptional evidence found at places like Nasik, Karle, and Amaravati. These inscriptions were often made by kings, queens, and local officials and recorded grants to Buddhist monasteries or other religious institutions. Coins. The Satavahanas issued a large number of coins in various metals: lead, copper, silver, and rarely gold. These coins provide crucial insights into their economy, administration, language, and religious leanings. The inscriptions on coins were mostly in Prakrit and were written in the Brahmi script. Literary sources. References to the Satavahanas can be found in texts such as the Puranas, the Gatha Saptashati, a collection of Prakrit poems, and other ancient Indian literature. Classical texts also refer to them as the Andhras, linking them to a people mentioned in older Vedic literature. Foreign accounts. Greco-Roman texts, particularly those of Pliny the Elder and the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, refer to India's maritime trade during the Satavahana period. These works highlight India's role in the Indian Ocean trade network, in which the Satavahanas were key players. Archaeological excavations. Sites such as Amaravati, Nagarjunakonda, and Ter have yielded a rich trove of archaeological materials, including pottery, sculptures, and architectural remains that help reconstruct life during the Satavahana age. Geographical reach and capital cities. The Satavahana Empire primarily occupied the Deccan Plateau and controlled parts of present-day Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. Their empire had multiple capitals at different times. Pratisthana, modern Paithan in Maharashtra, was one of the earliest and most significant capitals. Amaravati, located in present-day Andhra Pradesh, was another key administrative and cultural center. This geographical diversity not only allowed the Satavahanas to dominate important trade routes, both overland and maritime, but also enabled the empire to be a melting pot of different cultural and linguistic traditions. Significance of the Satavahanas. The Satavahanas' importance in Indian history is multifold. 1. Restoration of Vedic traditions. After the prominence of Buddhism under the Mauryas, especially Ashoka, the Satavahanas played a key role in the revival and promotion of Vedic and Brahmanical traditions. They were instrumental in re-establishing Brahminical authority and sacrificial rituals, even as they continued to patronize Buddhist institutions generously. 2. Promotion of Prakrit. Unlike the Mauryas, who used both Prakrit and Sanskrit, and later dynasties that heavily leaned into Sanskrit, the Satavahanas promoted Prakrit literature and used it extensively in their inscriptions and coins. 3. Maritime trade expansion. The Satavahanas helped transform the Deccan into a major hub of international trade, especially with the Roman Empire, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia. Their control of key ports allowed the Indian subcontinent to flourish economically during their reign. 4. Buddhist art and architecture. The Satavahanas were great patrons of Buddhist art and architecture, especially seen in the development of the Amaravati school of art and the construction of Buddhist stupas, chaityas, prayer halls, and viharas, monasteries, across the Deccan. 5. Federal style of governance. The Satavahana rulers implemented a flexible and relatively decentralized style of governance. Local kings and chieftains were allowed autonomy in return for allegiance and tribute, a method that would influence later Indian dynasties. Chronology and timeline overview. The Satavahanas ruled for nearly 3 centuries, although the dynasty was not uniformly strong throughout that time. The commonly accepted timeline is as follows. 1st century BCE, rise of the early Satavahanas following the collapse of the Mauryan Empire. 1st–2nd century CE, ascendancy under powerful rulers like Gautamiputra Satakarni and Vasisthiputra Pulumavi. 3rd century CE, gradual decline due to internal succession struggles and the rise of rival powers like the Western satraps, Ikshvakus, and others. Chapter 2. Origins and Early History. The roots of the Satavahana Empire. The Satavahana Empire emerged in the Deccan region during a time of considerable flux in Indian history. The fall of the Mauryan Empire around 185 BCE had created a political vacuum across much of northern and central India. This vacuum was soon filled by a series of regional powers, including the Shungas in the north, the Indo-Greeks in the northwest, and the Satavahanas in the central Deccan. The Satavahanas, often identified with the Andhras of the Puranas, were among the first native dynasties to rise to power in post-Mauryan India. 2.1. The identity of the Satavahanas. The term Satavahana is believed to have originated from the Prakrit word Sata, meaning 100, and Vahana, meaning vehicle or bearer, although interpretations vary. The dynasty is also referred to as the Andhras in ancient texts such as the Puranas, Mahabharata, and Buddhist literature. However, historians debate whether the terms Satavahana and Andhra referred to the same people or were distinct in origin, but later merged in historical records. The Satavahanas considered themselves Brahmin by caste, but performed royal functions typical of Kshatriyas. This fusion of Brahminical and warrior traditions played an important role in shaping their policies, particularly their relationship with religious institutions and their legitimization of rule through Vedic rituals. 2.2 Historical context and rise to power. Following the collapse of the Mauryan Empire, northern India witnessed the rise of the Shunga dynasty and later the Kanva dynasty, both of which struggled to exert authority over the Deccan. This allowed local chieftains and tribal leaders to assert their independence and form new power centers. The Satavahanas rose from such a background, likely as local leaders or feudatories who eventually asserted complete sovereignty. There is some evidence to suggest that the Satavahanas had their original base in the Andhra region, particularly around Krishna and Godavari river valleys, although their earliest stronghold was likely further north, around Paithan, Pratisthana, in modern Maharashtra. 2.3 Simukha, the founder. Simukha is widely acknowledged as the founder of the Satavahana dynasty. According to the Puranas, he ruled for 23 years. Though much about his reign is unclear, inscriptions and numismatic evidence indicate that Simukha played a crucial role in laying the foundations of the dynasty by defeating local rivals and establishing the capital at Pratisthana. Simukha's greatest contribution was consolidating the disparate regions of the Deccan under one banner, establishing not just political control, but also administrative coherence. Though he is not credited with large-scale military conquests, his achievements in stabilizing and formalizing the early state were significant. 2.4. Expansion and consolidation. After Simukha, his successors, especially his brother Krishna, Kanha, and later rulers, expanded Satavahana influence across the Deccan Plateau. Kanha's rule is notable for his grants to Buddhist institutions, indicating the dynasty's early patronage of Buddhism alongside their Brahmanical lineage. The Deccan at this time was a region of great strategic importance, with control over key inland trade routes as well as access to the western and eastern coasts. The Satavahanas were quick to capitalize on this, extending their influence toward western Maharashtra, Gujarat, and eastern Andhra. 2. 5. Conflict with the western satraps and Indo-Scythians. One of the defining features of the Satavahana rise was their long-standing conflict with the western satraps, Indo-Scythian rulers who had established dominions in western India, particularly Gujarat and parts of Malwa. The Satavahanas' push westward inevitably brought them into conflict with these foreign powers. This rivalry would culminate in a series of military campaigns under Gautamiputra Satakarni, a later and much more powerful ruler. However, the seeds of this conflict were sown early in the Satavahana period, as both dynasties sought control over key trade routes and urban centers like Ujjain, Nasik, and Sopara. 2.6. Early administrative practices. The early Satavahanas adopted many elements of Mauryan governance, including the use of Brahmi script, centralized land revenue systems, and appointment of royal officials. At the same time, they began evolving distinct local practices suited to the Deccan's geography and society. One example is the introduction of matronymic naming among the Satavahana kings, a practice where rulers were identified through their mother's name, such as Gautamiputra, son of Gautami. This may have been a strategic move to emphasize royal legitimacy through maternal lineage, which was often considered sacred or divinely sanctioned in certain traditions. 2.7. Early religious patronage. Though Brahmins themselves, the Satavahanas were notable for their religious tolerance and support for multiple faiths. Early rulers made land grants to Buddhist monasteries, especially in the Nasik and Karla regions, while also performing Vedic sacrifices and supporting Brahmin scholars and priests. This dual patronage allowed the Satavahanas to gain support from both Brahmin elites and Buddhist communities, creating a broad base of social and religious legitimacy. 2.8. Literary and cultural beginnings. Even in their early period, the Satavahanas showed interest in promoting regional culture. While Sanskrit was considered a classical language of elites, Prakrit was adopted as the administrative and literary medium, reflecting the vernacular language of the people. Though most early literary records are lost, inscriptions suggest that court poets and officials composed in elegant forms of Prakrit verse. This early embrace of regional language would go on to influence Indian literature for centuries. 2.9. Challenges and survival. The early Satavahana rulers faced several challenges: hostile neighbors like the western satraps and minor Deccan chieftains, internal fragmentation due to the Deccan's diverse ethnic and cultural makeup, the need to maintain trade flow and economic stability amid competition. However, the dynasty survived these pressures and gradually transitioned from a regional power to an imperial force, culminating in the reign of Gautamiputra Satakarni, who would go on to define the high point of Satavahana dominance. Conclusion of Chapter 2. The early history of the Satavahana Empire sets the stage for their remarkable achievements in governance, culture, and economy. From modest beginnings under Simuka, the dynasty laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most influential empires in southern India. The consolidation of the Deccan, combined with religious diplomacy and trade expansion, positioned the Satavahanas as rightful successors to the Mauryas in the Indian subcontinent. Chapter 3. Political history and key rulers of the Satavahana Empire. 3.1. Introduction to Satavahana, political legacy. The political history of the Satavahana Empire is marked by cycles of expansion, consolidation, conflict, and eventual decline. Throughout their reign, the Satavahanas demonstrated an adaptive political system, responding to internal succession issues and external threats, while striving to hold a vast and diverse territory together. Their kings, some of whom left a profound legacy on Indian history, played pivotal roles in expanding the empire and stabilizing the Deccan region. 3. 2. Founding ruler Simuka Satavahana. Simuka, widely regarded as the founder of the Satavahana dynasty, laid the initial foundation for the empire around the 1st century BCE. The Puranas mention his reign as lasting approximately 23 years. While exact details about his rule are limited, he is credited with freeing the Deccan from the declining Kanva and Shunga influences and restoring a form of local rule with centralized authority. Simuka's primary contribution was state formation, establishing a power base and setting the tone for future rulers. He is also believed to have begun the policy of dual religious patronage, supporting both Vedic and Buddhist institutions. 3.3. Kanha, Krishna. Simuka's brother and successor, Kanha, continued the early Satavahana consolidation efforts, His reign is best remembered for early land grants to Buddhist monasteries, particularly near Nasik, which suggest his rule extended over important trade and pilgrimage centers. Inscriptions at Nasik refer to Kanha as a Raja, and some suggest that he was an early adopter of the practice of issuing royal charters, which became common later in Satavahana administration. 3.4 Satakarni. Satakarni the Fui, possibly a grandson of Simuka, was a pivotal early king who greatly expanded Satavahana power. His reign is marked by military conquests in Malwa and the northern Deccan, performance of Ashvamedha Yajnas, horse sacrifices, to legitimize his rule and claim imperial status, adoption of grand titles like Rajan and Maharathi. His military prowess and ritual authority helped project the Satavahanas as a dominant force in peninsular India. The Puranas attribute a 56-year reign to Satakarni I, a figure debated by historians, though it does indicate long-term stability. 3.5 Gap and Decline. Interregnum period.
3.5 Gap and Decline Interregnum period. After Satakarni I, there appears to be a gap or period of decline in Satavahana power. This interregnum phase is characterized by weak successors who failed to hold territories, the growing influence of foreign powers such as the Western satraps, Shakas, fragmentation within the empire. For a few decades, the Satavahanas were pushed eastward, and many of their strongholds, especially in Western India, came under foreign control. 3. 6. The greatest ruler, Gautamiputra Satakarni, c. 78-102 CE. Gautamiputra Satakarni is widely considered the greatest ruler of the Satavahana dynasty. Much of what we know about him comes from inscriptions, particularly the Nasik Prashasti inscription, composed by his mother, Gautami Balashri, after his death. Key achievements: defeated the Western satraps under Nahapana and reclaimed Western Deccan territories like Malwa, Saurashtra, and northern Maharashtra. Restored Satavahana supremacy in crucial trade and military regions. Performed Vedic sacrifices, reasserting Brahmanical orthodoxy. His rule marked the revival and golden age of the Satavahana Empire. He successfully combined religious legitimacy, military strength, and economic control to stabilize the empire. 3.7 Vasisthaputra Pulumavi. Gautamiputra's son, Vasisthaputra Pulumavi, inherited a strong and expansive empire. He ruled for several decades and focused more on administration, trade, and consolidation rather than military conquest. Key features of his rule: issued a large number of lead and silver coins, indicating strong economic activity. Encouraged long-distance trade, especially with the Roman Empire, through ports like Kalyan and Sapporo. Made extensive religious donations, both to Brahmins and Buddhist monasteries, continuing the dynasty's tradition of religious inclusivity. Presided over artistic developments at Amaravati, one of India's most significant centers of Buddhist art. 3.8 Rulers of the later period. Following Pulumavi, the empire passed through several less documented rulers, including Sriyajna Satakarni. Often considered the last great ruler of the dynasty, he succeeded in pushing back the Western satraps one final time and restoring Satavahana influence. Other lesser-known kings, many of whom had short reigns or ruled only fragmented territories. This period is marked by increasing decentralization and internal disputes, possibly due to succession issues and rising provincial independence. 3. 9 key features of Satavahana monarchy. The Satavahana kingship model was shaped by a mix of indigenous Deccan traditions and post-Mauryan imperial ideology. Matronymic naming, e.g. Gautamiputra Vasisthaputra signaled royal lineage through the mother's name. This unique practice was probably intended to reinforce dynastic legitimacy and purity. Titles such as Maharaja, Rajan, Maharathi, and Lord of Dakshinapatha were commonly used. The king was both military leader and religious patron, a dual role critical in legitimizing rule. Despite being Brahmins by caste, many Satavahana rulers adopted Kshatriya functions such as warfare and rule. 3.10 Administration and provincial governance. The political structure of the Satavahanas, while monarchic, was also notably decentralized. Features included appointment of Amatyas ministers, Mahatalavara officers, and Mahabhojas viceroys. Feudatories and provincial rulers, Mahasenapati, Maharathi, had significant autonomy, but were expected to pay tribute and support the king in war. Local governance was often managed by village assemblies and guilds, particularly in urban centers. 3 to 3. 11. Marriage alliances and diplomacy. Marriage alliances were a key political strategy. The Satavahanas often married into powerful regional clans, including the Ikshvakus and other Kshatriya houses. These alliances helped stabilize frontier regions and build loyalty among influential families. 3. 12. Decline of Satavahana political power. By the mid-3rd century CE, Satavahana power began to wane. Constant wars with the western satraps drained resources. Provinces started asserting independence, particularly in eastern Deccan and Andhra. The rise of Ikshvakus, Abhiras, and Kadambas further fragmented the empire. Trade disruptions, succession disputes, and administrative decay hastened the collapse. Conclusion of Chapter 3. The political history of the Satavahanas is a tale of early rise, a golden age under rulers like Gautamiputra Satakarni, and eventual decline due to internal and external pressures. Their legacy, however, remains crucial in Indian history. They were not just regional kings, but imperial rulers who shaped the destiny of the Deccan for centuries. Chapter 4. Society and Culture under the Satavahanas. Introduction. The Satavahana period marked a significant evolution in Indian social structure, lifestyle, cultural patronage, and intellectual growth, particularly in the Deccan region. While politically the Satavahanas were known for their resilient monarchy, culturally they served as torchbearers of pluralism, encouraging the growth of both Brahmanical and Buddhist traditions, promoting regional languages, and supporting a highly stratified yet adaptive society. 4.2 Varna system and social stratification. The Satavahana society was largely organized around the Varna system, though it was far more flexible compared to the rigid stratification seen in later periods. Key aspects. The Brahmins enjoyed royal patronage and were granted land and honors for performing rituals and maintaining Vedic traditions. The Kshatriyas, including the ruling Satavahana family, were responsible for administration and warfare. Interestingly, despite being Brahmins by caste, many Satavahana rulers performed Kshatriya duties, blurring traditional Varna roles. Vaishyas and Shudras were deeply engaged in trade, crafts, agriculture, and guild work. Their economic contribution was highly valued. The period also saw a large number of artisans, merchants, and foreign settlers, especially in port cities, indicating a society that welcomed diversity. Women, too, had a considerable place in society, particularly royal women like Gautami Balashri, who issued inscriptions and made religious donations in her own name, a rare occurrence in ancient Indian history. 4.3 Women in Satavahana society. One of the standout features of Satavahana society was the status of women, especially in the royal household. The matronymic naming convention, e.g., My Gautamiputra Satakarni, suggests the prominence of motherhood in royal succession, possibly indicating matrilineal elements in the ruling lineage. Notable examples. Gautami Balashri, mother of Gautamiputra Satakarni, is credited with one of the most important inscriptions detailing her son's achievements. Nayanika, wife of Satakarni Dayal, also issued inscriptions and was actively involved in religious and political life. While women in the general populace followed more traditional roles, the participation of royal women in politics and religion speaks volumes about their empowerment. 4.4 Language and Literature. The Satavahanas played a crucial role in the development of Prakrit, which served as the administrative and literary language of the time. Even inscriptions and official charters were written in Prakrit rather than Sanskrit. Contributions. Prakrit inscriptions were issued in Brahmi script, often found in Nasik, Karla, and Amaravati. Literature from the Satavahana period, although not fully preserved, contributed to the cultural growth of the Deccan. This includes early Buddhist texts and Jataka stories popular in the region. Oral traditions flourished in local dialects, many of which would evolve into modern Dravidian and Indo-Aryan languages. 4.5 Education and learning. Education was largely imparted through religious institutions, both Vedic and Buddhist. Buddhist monasteries, viharas, doubled as centers of learning. Monks studied and taught philosophy, ethics, astronomy, and medicine. Vedic learning focused on scriptures, rituals, grammar, and logic. The coexistence of these two models created a rich and intellectually plural society. There is also evidence of foreign influences on education, especially from Greek, Persian, and Roman contacts, leading to cross-cultural exchanges in science, medicine, and navigation. 4.6 Festivals, music, and daily life. Satavahana culture was vibrant and celebratory. Festivals like Makara Sankranti, Buddha Purnima, and equinox rituals were widely celebrated. Music and dance were central to courtly and religious life. Reliefs from Amaravati show dancers, musicians, and theatrical performances. Ayurvedic medicine, agriculture, and guild-based crafts structured the day-to-day life of the common people. 4.7 Clothing, jewelry, and lifestyle. Inscriptions and sculptures from Amaravati, Nasik, and Kala provide insights into how people dressed and lived. Both men and women wore garments made of cotton and silk. Men commonly wore dhotis, while women wore saris or draped garments. Ornaments like earrings, necklaces, bangles, and waistbands were common across social classes, though in varied materials. The elite classes often used ivory, gold, and pearls, especially in coastal cities linked to maritime trade. 4.8 Guilds and urban culture. Guilds, known as shrenis, were integral to Satavahana urban life. These were associations of merchants, craftsmen, weavers, blacksmiths, jewelry makers. Guilds had their own internal governance systems and even functioned as banks, providing loans and managing temples or religious endowments. Urban centers like Pratisthana, Python, Tagara, Amaravati, and Danyakataka flourished under Satavahana rule. 4.9 Buddhist and Brahmanical coexistence. One of the most defining cultural features of the Satavahanas was religious coexistence. The kings were Brahmins, yet they gave equal patronage to Buddhism. Massive Buddhist complexes, such as those at Kala, Nasik, and Amaravati, were funded through royal donations. Simultaneously, yajnas, temple constructions, and Brahmanical rituals were sponsored by the state. This pluralistic approach allowed different belief systems to flourish side by side, a model of tolerance that influenced later Indian empires. 4.10 Contributions to Indian culture. The Satavahanas' contributions to Indian culture are numerous. Sculptural art at Amaravati and Nasik set the tone for early Indian aesthetic styles. They helped integrate the Deccan with both North Indian and South Indian cultural traditions. Their coinage, language, and urban planning were ahead of their time and provided a blueprint for future dynasties like the Ikshvakus, Pallavas, and Chalukyas. Conclusion of Chapter 4. The society and culture of the Satavahanas were defined by pluralism, artistic achievement, and adaptive governance. Their commitment to diverse religious traditions, regional identities, and educational institutions made the Deccan not just a political center, but a cradle of cultural synthesis. The Satavahanas laid the foundation for a uniquely Indian civilization that was open to the world, yet rooted in its own values. Chapter 5. Economy and Trade of the Satavahana Empire, target 3,000 words. 5.1. Introduction. The economic landscape of the Satavahana Empire was one of the most dynamic and integrated systems of ancient India. Their economic policies reflected a strong emphasis on agriculture, trade, both inland and maritime, craft production, and monetary transactions. By leveraging their strategic location across the Deccan Plateau, the Satavahanas transformed their realm into a vital link between northern India, southern India, and the wider world, including Rome, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. 5.2 Agriculture and land revenue. Agriculture was the backbone of the Satavahana economy. Major features. Land was categorized based on fertility, and taxes were levied accordingly. Common crops included rice, millet, pulses, cotton, and sugarcane. Use of irrigation tanks, canals, and wells improved agricultural output, especially in semi-arid areas of the Deccan. Revenue. Land revenue was collected either in cash or kind, with a portion going to the state treasury. Land grants, agraharas, to Brahmins and monasteries became more common, helping spread religious and educational influence, but also decentralizing revenue sources. 5.3 Mining and metallurgy. The Deccan region is rich in mineral resources, and the Satavahanas harnessed this to strengthen their economy. Iron, copper, lead, and gold were extracted in regions like Bastar, Chanda, and Nasik. Evidence from excavated sites suggests organized mining and smelting furnaces. Metal tools and weapons improved both agriculture and military capabilities. 5.4 Artisanal production and guild economy. Artisans formed the economic core of Satavahana urban life. Guilds, shrenis, were powerful, semi-autonomous bodies that regulated quality, pricing, and labor rights. Key crafts. Textiles. Cotton weaving centers flourished in Python and Tagara. Jewelry making. Use of pearls, gold, and ivory, particularly in port towns. Pottery, stonework, metalwork, and ivory carving were highly developed. Guilds often made donations to temples and monasteries, showing their wealth and social influence. 5.5 Trade and commerce. Satavahanas turned the Deccan into a thriving trade corridor, connecting northern and southern India. Inland trade. Cities like Pratishtana, Pathan, and Tagara were major inland trade hubs. Goods like textiles, spices, beads, salt, and iron tools moved across major routes. Pack animals, carts, and boats were used for transportation. Maritime trade. The western ports of Sopara, Kalyan, Baruch, and Chaul were bustling centers. The eastern port of Masulipatam connected India to Southeast Asia. 5.6 International trade and Roman connection. Perhaps the most iconic aspect of Satavahana trade was its extensive contact with the Roman Empire. Roman Satavahana trade. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder lamented the flow of gold from Rome to India. Items exported: spices, textiles, gemstones, ivory, and perfumes. Items imported: Roman wine, gold coins, glassware, coral, and fine pottery. Roman coins have been found in Andhra, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, indicating large-scale commercial activity. 5.7 Taxation and fiscal policy. The Satavahana state maintained a structured tax system. Land revenue, Bhaga, formed the main source. Trade taxes, port fees, customs duties, and guild contributions supplemented state income. Some taxes were collected in kind, especially in remote areas. The administrative apparatus ensured efficient revenue collection and maintained economic stability across the empire. 5.8 Currency and monetary economy. One of the hallmarks of Satavahana economic strength was its coinage. Coin characteristics. Coins were made of lead, copper, pautin, and silver. Designs included Ujjain symbols, ships, elephants, bulls, and portraits. Inscriptions were mostly in Prakrit, using the Brahmi script. Coins were not just monetary instruments, but also tools of propaganda and state identity. Roman coins also circulated alongside local currency and trade hubs. 5.9 Infrastructure and trade routes. The Satavahanas invested heavily in roadways, rest houses, and security to promote trade. Trade routes connected the west coast, Sopara, Baruch, to the east coast, Masulipatam. Caravanserais, rest stations, and river ports ensured smooth movement of goods. Roads often passed through Buddhist monasteries, which served as safe lodgings for traders and pilgrims alike. 5.10 Integration of regions through economy. The Satavahana economic model brought about regional integration. The northern parts, Vidarbha, Malwa, provided metals and grains. Central Deccan, Andhra, and Maharashtra served as industrial and urban hubs. Southern regions contributed spices, pearls, and maritime access. This economic integration helped maintain the political unity of the empire and fostered cultural syncretism through trade. Conclusion of Chapter 5. The Satavahana Empire's economic prowess lay in its diverse and interconnected systems, from fertile agricultural zones to prosperous inland cities and globally connected ports. Through meticulous administration, strategic investments in infrastructure, and strong guild-based production, the Satavahanas created an economy that was not only self-sufficient, but also outward-looking. Their Roman trade, coinage system, and craft-based urban economy laid down the blueprint for future empires like the Chalukyas and Rashtrakutas. In economic terms, the Satavahanas stand out as pioneers of India's ancient global trade network, enriching not only their own empire, but also contributing significantly to the wealth of the wider ancient world. Chapter 6. Art and Architecture of the Satavahana Empire. Target on 2,500 words. 6.1 Introduction. The Satavahanas left behind a rich legacy of art and architecture that shaped the cultural identity of the Deccan for centuries. Their patronage supported the growth of Buddhist architecture, stupa building, and the evolution of the Amaravati School of Art, which became one of ancient India's most refined artistic traditions. Despite being Brahmins, the Satavahana rulers were major patrons of Buddhist institutions, and their art reflected a unique synthesis of Buddhist themes, local craftsmanship, and international influences. 6.2. Architectural styles and materials. The architecture of the Satavahana period was characterized by the use of stone, brick, and wood, although much of the wooden work has not survived. Key elements: rock-cut architecture, temples and monasteries carved directly into stone, particularly in the Western Ghats. Freestanding stupas, symbolic Buddhist mounds enshrining relics or marking sacred spots. Use of limestone and granite, especially in sculptural work at Amaravati and Nasik. Structures were richly decorated with carvings, reliefs, and inscriptions. 6.3 Stupas and Buddhist monasteries. Stupa building flourished under Satavahana patronage. Major sites: Amaravati Stupa, Andhra Pradesh. A monumental stupa with exquisite limestone carvings illustrating Jataka tales, Buddha's life, and mythological scenes. Nasik Caves, Maharashtra. Sponsored by Satavahana kings and royal women, these caves include chaityas, prayer halls, and viharas, monasteries, with inscriptions attributing donations. Karla Caves, Lonavala. The Karla Chaitya is one of the largest and most beautiful rock-cut prayer halls in India, complete with a grand horseshoe-shaped facade, sculpted pillars, and intricate woodwork, some preserved in stone imitations. These monuments became centers of pilgrimage and education. 6.4 Amaravati School of Art. The Amaravati School is the most significant artistic tradition associated with the Satavahanas. Characteristics: use of white limestone to craft intricate high-relief sculptures. Emphasis on narrative storytelling, particularly Jataka tales. Depiction of human figures in graceful postures, flowing garments, and expressive facial features. Influence on later Buddhist art in Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and even Gandhara. This school represented a mature, indigenous Indian aesthetic that contrasted the more Hellenistic-inspired Gandhara school of the north. Legshofu Nasik and Kanheri Caves. Apart from Amaravati, the Nasik and Kanheri cave complexes serve as testimony to Satavahana architectural skill and religious patronage. Nasik Caves, commissioned by kings like Gautamiputra Satakarni and his mother Gautami Balashri. Notable for their inscriptions, pillared verandas, and stone-cut sanctuaries. Kanheri Caves, Mumbai region. Developed later but influenced by Satavahana models, these caves contained water systems, drainage systems, and carved halls for monks. These caves functioned as religious retreats, universities, and resting points for merchants and pilgrims. 6.6 Sculptural Themes and Motifs. The sculptures from Satavahana era sites reveal both religious symbolism and societal values. Key themes: life of the Buddha, scenes like the Great Departure, Enlightenment, and Sermon at Sarnath. Jataka tales, moral stories from the Buddha's past lives. Royal processions, elephants, chariots, and courtly scenes, highlighting daily life. Nature motifs, lotuses, vines, trees, and celestial beings like yakshas and apsaras. Sculptors achieved remarkable depth, motion, and grace, especially in Amaravati relief panels. 6.7 Brahmanical temples and symbols. Though Buddhist monuments dominate the Satavahana architectural legacy, the rulers also supported Brahmanical temples and rituals. Fire altars, yajna vedi, and shivalingas have been found in some archaeological contexts. Brahmanical iconography, such as nagas, lingams, and Vedic ritual scenes, are evident in reliefs and coins. This dual patronage helped maintain social harmony and religious inclusivity. 6.8 coins as artistic expression. Satavahana coins are not only economic tools, but also miniature works of art. Design features, portraits of kings, usually in profile. Animals like horses, elephants, and lions, symbolizing power and prosperity. Nautical symbols like ships, indicating maritime strength. Ujjain symbol, an emblematic cross with dots frequently used. The aesthetic quality and symbolic richness of these coins played a role in asserting imperial identity. 6.9 Regional diversity and artistic syncretism. One of the striking features of Satavahana art is how it reflects regional diversity while maintaining stylistic coherence. Andhra Pradesh, dominated by Amaravati-style limestone carvings. Maharashtra, rock-cut caves with more austere interiors but detailed facades. Karnataka, hybrid styles incorporating southern Dravidian motifs. Artisans adapted to local materials, religious demands, and cultural contexts, creating a multilingual, multicultural, artistic expression. 610. Legacy of Satavahana art. The Satavahana era laid the foundation for South Indian temple architecture, especially through evolution of the Chaitya and Vihara models, standardization of stupa building techniques, training centers for sculptors and architects whose influence spread to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and beyond. Later dynasties, including the Ikshvakus, Pallavas, and Chalukyas, borrowed heavily from the architectural and sculptural vocabulary developed under Satavahana patronage. Conclusion of Chapter 6. The art and architecture of the Satavahana Empire exemplify a golden period of creative expression in Indian history. Through their generous support of Buddhist institutions, innovative rock-cut architecture, and the flowering of the Amaravati school, the Satavahanas left an enduring mark on the cultural landscape of the Deccan and broader South Asia. Their works symbolize not just artistic brilliance, but also a deep respect for religious pluralism, narrative storytelling, and aesthetic elegance. The Satavahana monuments and sculptures remain timeless tributes to the empire's vision of a culturally integrated and spiritually rich civilization. Chapter 7. Administration and military organization of the Satavahana Empire. 7.1 Introduction. The Satavahana Empire, spanning a vast and diverse geographical area, required a robust administrative system and a capable military structure. Their governance combined centralized monarchy with regional autonomy, while their military was instrumental in defending the empire against foreign invasions and internal threats. The effectiveness of their administration and military played a key role in maintaining the stability and expansion of the Satavahana state over several centuries. 7.2 Structure of the government. The Satavahanas followed a monarchical system with the king at the center of administration. The king, the Rajadiraja, king of kings, was the supreme authority, both politically and religiously. Kings were considered protectors of Dharma, and their legitimacy was often reinforced through rituals like Ashvamedha Yajna and inscriptions claiming divine favor. Famous kings like Gautamiputra Satakarni emphasized their role as restorers of social order and defenders of the four Varnas. 7.3 Royal titles and ideology. Satavahana rulers used various titles to reinforce their authority. Maharaja, great king. Rajadiraja, king of kings. Dakshinapatapati, lord of the south. Eka Brahmana, protector of Brahmanism. These titles, often found on inscriptions and coins, projected their supremacy and their role as guardians of moral and social order. 7.4 Central administration. The central government was structured with a core group of advisors and officials, key officers. Amatyas, ministers or secretaries managing different departments. Mahasenapati, commander-in-chief of the army. Rajamatya, chief minister or royal council. Bandhagaradhyaksha, officer in charge of the treasury. Rahira, royal priest and advisor on religious matters. The administration was supported by a network of scribes, accountants, and messengers to maintain communication and record-keeping. 7.5 Provincial and local administration. The Satavahana Empire was divided into provinces, Janapadas or Ahara, which were further divided into districts, Vishayas, and villages, Gramas. Uparajas, viceroys or Kumaras, princes, often governed large provinces. Mahamatas and Galmikas supervised local governance and tax collection. Village assemblies and guild councils played a role in managing local affairs, especially in urban centers. This multi-tiered administrative model allowed for efficient governance and local participation. 7.6 Legal and judicial system. Justice was administered according to Dharma, with the king as the highest judicial authority. Disputes were resolved based on customary law, Smriti texts, and royal edicts. Local disputes were often handled by village elders, guild leaders, or monastic heads. Punishments included fines, exile, or public shaming, rather than severe corporal punishment. The Satavahana legal system aimed to balance royal authority with community mediation. 7.7 Revenue and taxation system. The empire relied on a well-organized taxation system to sustain administration and the military. Key revenue sources. Bhaga, share of agricultural produce, usually 1/6, trade taxes and customs duties, port fees and market tolls. Tributes from feudatories and gifted lands, agraharas, were exempt but often paid in ritual goods. Revenue collection was overseen by provincial officers and was often done in both cash and kind. 7.8 Military organization. The Satavahana army was a vital part of their state machinery and territorial integrity. Composition. Infantry, foot soldiers formed the bulk of the army. Cavalry provided mobility, especially effective in open terrain. Elephants, used for breaking enemy lines and psychological warfare. Chariots, though less important over time, they retained ceremonial value. Recruitment. Soldiers were drawn from warrior clans, kshatriyas, and local populations. Some units were maintained by feudatory chiefs in exchange for land grants. 7.9 Military campaigns and conflicts. The Satavahanas were engaged in multiple wars throughout their reign. Against the Shakas, particularly under Gautamiputra Satakarni, the Satavahanas pushed back the western Kshatrapas and reclaimed western India. With the Kushans, skirmishes occurred in the north as the Satavahanas attempted to protect central India from Kushan expansion. Southern expansion. They clashed with regional powers like the Cholas and Pandyas, especially over control of trade routes. These campaigns helped define the political geography of the Deccan for generations. 710. Fortifications and security. To ensure safety and control, the Satavahanas invested in hill forts and walled cities in strategic locations, watchtowers and gates along trade routes, military outposts in border areas. Security was not just military, but also economic and administrative, ensuring smooth governance and trade. Conclusion of Chapter 7. The administrative and military apparatus of the Satavahana Empire reflects their capacity to govern a diverse and expansive realm through an organized bureaucracy, layered provincial systems, and an adaptable military. The Satavahanas established one of the most enduring regimes in ancient India. Their model of governance, a balance of central authority, local autonomy, and religious legitimacy, served as a foundation for many later South Indian dynasties. Their ability to maintain internal order and external defense enabled the Satavahana Empire to flourish culturally, economically, and politically. Chapter 8. Religion and Philosophy in the Satavahana Empire. 8.1 Introduction. The Satavahana period was marked by religious tolerance, philosophical diversity, and state support from multiple faiths. While the rulers themselves were primarily Brahmanical Hindus, they extended significant patronage to Buddhism, and their era witnessed the flourishing of religious art, institutions, and thought. The Deccan, under the Satavahanas, became a spiritual and intellectual crossroads, where different traditions coexisted and influenced one another. 8.2. Religious landscape of the empire. The Satavahana Empire was home to a pluralistic religious society comprising Vedic Hinduism, Brahmanism, Buddhism, especially the Hinayana Theravada tradition, Jainism, though less prominent, indigenous beliefs, nature worship, and yaksha cults. Rather than enforcing a single-state religion, the Satavahanas allowed various traditions to thrive, with the state supporting religious diversity as a unifying strategy. 8.3. Brahmanism and Vedic traditions. Although their earliest inscriptions reflect a strong Brahmanical orientation, Satavahana rulers often practiced non-sectarianism. Features. Rituals like Ashvamedha and Rajasuya yajnas were performed by kings to assert their dharma and legitimacy. Land grants were given to Brahmins, Agraharas, for maintaining Vedic learning and rituals. Symbols like the trident, Trishula, and Shivalinga on coins and sculptures suggest Shaivism was particularly respected. Queen Gautami Balashri, mother of Gautamiputra Satakarni, praised her son for restoring the Varna system, indicating concern for social and religious order. 8.4. Patronage of Buddhism. Despite being Brahmins, Satavahana rulers were some of the greatest patrons of Buddhism in ancient India. Contributions. Stupas and viharas at Amaravati, Karla, Nasik, and Kanheri were built or enhanced under their rule. Donations were made to Buddhist monastic communities, as reflected in cave inscriptions. Buddhist art flourished under their rule, with depictions of Jataka tales, Buddha's life, and philosophical teachings. The coexistence of Buddhism and Brahmanism demonstrates the religious flexibility of Satavahana society. 8.5. Religious inscriptions and epigraphy. Many Satavahana-era inscriptions provide insights into religious donations and practices. Inscriptions at Nasik and Karla mention gifts by royal women, including queens and princesses. The inscriptions often began with religious invocations like svasti and cited the purpose of donations, from building caves to supporting monks. These records show not only royal support, but participation by merchants, guilds, and commoners in religious life. 8.6. Role of women in religious life. Women of the royal family and elite classes played a key role in religious patronage. Gautami Balashri, as mentioned earlier, was a major donor and honored in inscriptions. Many women donated pillars, railings, and caves for Buddhist monks and monasteries. This participation highlights gender roles in religious merit-making and public life. Such involvement also reflects the progressive ethos of Deccan society under the Satavahanas. 8.7. Philosophical trends. The Satavahana period witnessed the dialogue and coexistence of philosophical systems, particularly Buddhist schools of thought, including Abhidharma and early Mahayana ideas, which emerged during this period. Brahmanical philosophies, such as early forms of Samkhya, Mimamsa, and Vedanta, were propagated through Vedic education supported by royal grants. Indigenous folk philosophies and nature cults continued to thrive among rural and tribal populations. This pluralistic environment contributed to the development of Indian philosophical traditions that would later influence schools like Advaita and Madhyamaka. 8. Temples, stupas, and ritual spaces. The Satavahanas built and supported a wide range of sacred structures. Chaityas, prayer halls, and viharas, monastic residences and Buddhist complexes, yajna platforms, linga shrines, and fire altars in Brahmanical rituals. Village shrines dedicated to local deities and fertility goddesses. These sacred spaces also acted as centers of education, healthcare, and community gatherings. 8.9. Religion and society. Religion played a major role in maintaining social order and legitimacy. The Varna system was promoted, particularly by rulers like Gautamiputra Satakarni. However, Buddhist monasteries offered an alternative for those seeking spiritual liberation beyond caste. Merchant communities aligned with Buddhism helped establish trade-linked monasteries. This dual structure, Brahmanical social order and Buddhist spiritual egalitarianism, created a balanced religious ecosystem. 8.10. Legacy of Satavahana religious policy. The religious contributions of the Satavahanas had long-lasting effects. They set the stage for the Ikshvakus, Vakatakas, and Chalukyas, who adopted similar dual patronage models. Buddhist art and architecture from this era inspired regions like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Southeast Asia. Their inscriptions remain vital sources for understanding ancient Indian religion and ethics. Most importantly, their model of tolerant, pluralistic governance remains a testament to India's ancient tradition of religious harmony. Conclusion of Chapter 8. Religion under the Satavahanas was not just a matter of personal belief or ritual, it was a dynamic social, political, and cultural force. The rulers, while rooted in Brahmanism, supported Buddhism wholeheartedly, allowing it to flourish through monumental art, education, and public engagement. Their religious policies contributed to the Deccan's status as a spiritual heartland and influenced the religious developments of South and Southeast Asia. Chapter 9. Decline and Legacy of the Satavahana Empire. 9.1 Introduction. The Satavahana Empire, after centuries of prominence in the Deccan region, began to decline around the 3rd century CE. While their rise had been marked by military success, administrative strength, and cultural flourishing, their decline was shaped by internal weaknesses, external invasions, and the emergence of new regional powers. However, the legacy of the Satavahanas remained profound, continuing to influence the political, cultural, and religious fabric of India long after their fall. 9.2 Causes of Decline. 1. Succession struggles. Like many dynasties, the Satavahanas faced frequent disputes over succession, particularly after the reign of powerful rulers like Gautamiputra Satakarni and Vasisthiputra Pulumavi. These disputes fragmented the central authority and led to weaker leadership. Administrative decentralization. While decentralization had earlier been a strength, over time, it led to autonomous local rulers and feudatories who began asserting independence, undermining the empire's unity. Economic strain. The cost of maintaining a vast military, public works, and religious patronage may have exceeded the empire's resources. Additionally, the decline in Roman trade after the 3rd century CE reduced inflows of wealth. Port cities and trade routes were lost to rising regional powers. 4. Invasions and external pressures. Invasions by the Western Kshatrapas, who reclaimed lost territories. The Ikshvakus, who took control of Eastern Deccan. Possibly the Abhiras and Vakatakas, who began expanding from neighboring regions. These pressures eroded the Satavahana control over key regions. 9.3 Fragmentation of the empire. By the late 3rd century CE, the Satavahana Empire had splintered into smaller kingdoms. Ikshvakus in Andhra, Abhiras and Vakatakas in Western Deccan, Kadambas and Pallavas emerging in the south. This period, though politically fragmented, was culturally fertile, a transition from empire to regional states. 9.4 The Final Rulers. The names of the last Satavahana rulers are known from coins and inscriptions, but historical details are scarce. One of the last known rulers was Yajna Sri Satakarni, who made some military gains. His successors lacked centralized authority, and power gradually slipped from the Satavahanas into the hands of local warlords and new dynasties. By around 225 CE, the Satavahanas had effectively disappeared from political dominance. 9.55 Legacy of the Satavahanas. Despite their decline, the impact of the Satavahanas was immense and lasting. 1. Political legacy. Introduced the model of feudatory governance that many later dynasties, e.g. by Vakatakas, Chalukyas adopted. Their coinage system influenced subsequent monetary practices with images, legends, and bilingual inscriptions. 2. Cultural influence. The Amaravati school of art, sponsored by the Satavahanas, inspired artistic traditions in Southeast Asia. 3. Language and literature promoted Prakrit as the court language and left behind a body of inscriptions valuable to historical linguistics. Their reign saw the early seeds of Sanskrit literary traditions, though later dynasties would fully embrace Sanskrit. 4. Architecture and urban development. Developed major centers like Amaravati, Nasik, Junnar, and Python. Their stupas and rock-cut cave complexes set the template for later Buddhist and Hindu architecture. 5. Religious legacy. Played a crucial role in the spread of Buddhism, particularly Theravada, across the Deccan and overseas. At the same time, they reinforced Brahmanical orthodoxy, creating a balanced religious society. 9.6 Transition to new power. The fall of the Satavahanas allowed for the rise of Ikshvakus, who continued patronizing Buddhist monuments like Nagarjuna Koma, Vakatakas, who supported both Brahmanism and classical Sanskrit culture, Kadambas and Pallavas, who rose to prominence in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. These dynasties inherited the administrative systems, religious tolerance, and urban models laid down by the Satavahanas. 9.7. Satavahanas in later memory. Although forgotten by popular tradition for centuries, modern archaeological discoveries and scholarly work have revived the importance of the Satavahanas. Inscriptions and coins have provided key chronological anchors for ancient Indian history. Their reign is now seen as a bridge between the Mauryan Empire and classical South Indian kingdoms. The Satavahanas are also recognized for maintaining Indian unity and trade during a period of fragmentation in North India, after the Mauryan collapse. Conclusion of Chapter 9. The decline of the Satavahana Empire was not an end, but a transformation. From empire to regional states, from centralized rule to cultural diversity. Their enduring legacy lives on in India's administrative history, art and architecture, religious thought, and cultural resilience. As custodians of a vast and complex realm, the Satavahanas not only governed, but also nurtured the soul of the Deccan, shaping its identity for generations to come. Their story is a testament to the power of inclusive governance, visionary leadership, and the cultural richness of ancient India. Chapter 10. Conclusion. The enduring legacy of the Satavahanas. Target 1,000 words. The story of the Satavahana Empire is one of resilience, revival, and renaissance. Emerging in the aftermath of the Mauryan collapse, the Satavahanas became the guardians of the Deccan, holding together a vast and culturally diverse region during a period of uncertainty. For nearly 4 centuries, they maintained political unity, fostered economic prosperity, and championed religious and artistic plurality, leaving behind a legacy that endures to this day. 10. One political stabilizers of the Deccan. In a time when the Indian subcontinent was fractured into competing powers, the Satavahanas brought a measure of political stability to peninsular India. Their governance, which successfully blended centralized monarchy with local autonomy, offered a model that was both practical and sustainable. They managed to defend the Deccan from external invasions like those of the Shakas and Kushans, reassert Indian authority over trade routes and ports, provide continuity of rule at a time when the north was plagued by fragmentation. This political legacy influenced subsequent powers, including the Vakatakas, Chalukyas, and Rashtrakutas. 10.2 Cultural syncretism and religious harmony. The Satavahana period was remarkable for its religious inclusivity. Despite being Brahmanical rulers, they extended substantial support to Buddhism, funding monasteries and commissioning stupas. This dual patronage created a rich spiritual tapestry, blending Vedic traditions including yajnas, varna system, and temple rituals, Buddhist values of compassion, non-violence, and community living, local tribal and folk deities, which found a place within the broader religious framework. Such religious diplomacy and cultural openness sowed the seeds for India's enduring identity as a civilizational melting pot. 10.3 Economic engines of the ancient world. Economically, the Satavahanas transformed the Deccan into a commercial hub that linked India with Rome, Southeast Asia, and the interior of the subcontinent. Ports like Sappara, Kalyan, and Masulipatam thrived. Trade in spices, textiles, gems, and metals brought prosperity. They issued a standardized coinage system, enhancing confidence in trade transactions. Their economic policies not only brought wealth, but also enabled the flourishing of urban centers and craft industries, leaving a mark on India's ancient economic landscape. 10.4 Architects of Art and Language. Few ancient dynasties have contributed as richly to artistic heritage as the Satavahanas. The Amaravati school of art, with its refined carvings and narrative reliefs, stood as a beacon of Indian artistic excellence. Rock-cut caves at Nasik, Kanheri, and Karla combined structural innovation with spiritual symbolism. Their inscriptions in Prakrit and occasional Sanskrit have become crucial sources for understanding early Indian linguistics, society, and governance. They laid a cultural foundation upon which later empires would build. making the Satavahanas a cornerstone of Indian classical civilization. 10-5, a lasting impression. While their political power faded in the early 3rd century CE, the Satavahanas' contributions continued to echo across time. Religious models of coexistence they established inspired future rulers. Administrative practices they adopted became part of classical Indian polity. Their art and architecture directly influenced later Buddhist and Hindu monuments across Asia. Modern archaeology, epigraphy, and numismatics have only begun to unravel the depth of their legacy, reaffirming their status as pioneers of the southern subcontinent. 10.6. The Satavahanas today. Today, the Satavahanas are recognized as one of the most significant dynasties in Indian history. Their story is taught in history books, their art is preserved in museums, and their legacy continues to influence regional identities in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana. Their example serves as a reminder of the power of visionary leadership, the strength in diversity and tolerance, the lasting impact of cultural investment and human values. In every sense, the Satavahanas were more than just rulers. They were architects of civilization. Final thoughts. From humble beginnings to imperial grandeur, from war to wisdom, from material wealth to spiritual patronage, the journey of the Satavahanas stands as a timeless tale of resilience and brilliance. Their story, carved into caves, written on coins, and remembered through inscriptions, continues to inspire scholars, artists, and leaders even today. The Satavahanas may have passed into the annals of history, but their spirit lives on, etched into the soul of the Deccan and the heart of India.